Firstly, let me acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional owners of the Greater Brisbane area, to the Jagera and Turrbal people, to everybody present here today. Thank you so very much for your time, and thanks for the invitation to Rosalie for allowing me to come and talk to Reconciliation Queensland, and for your time here. Thank you. And I just want to share some reconciliation stories with you. So my time at Toowoomba Grammar School, and I'm a jokey fella, and I'm going to pass over to Lou straight after this. Reconciliation, when you're at Toowoomba, like when I was at a border at Toowoomba Grammar School, and in 1982 was the Commonwealth Games here in Brisbane, and there was all the big protests, and I was only so I was 8, 9, 10, so I was only what I was 14, 15 years of age. And I remember one of my mates, Brad Horn, who's become a dear friend now. And then during 1982, there was all these protests going on, and Brad, he was from Dingo, up in the central Queensland, and Brad was a very good runner. And Brad used to run past me all the time, and he'd say, "Hey Stan, what do you want? What do we want? Land rights. When do we want it? Now." And so Brad would do this off to me all the time, and he'd be running around like this. I said, "Don't worry, Horn, don't worry, Horn, I'll get you one day, mate, I'll get you." And this one day we was down the bottom, and Greg, you might, there's an assembly hall at Toowoomba Grammar School, and there's about 7 stairs to the top. And Brad Horn was at the top of this, and at this time he was close enough to me, and I was down the bottom of the stairs going back to one of the classes. And Brad said, "Hey Stan, what do we want? Land rights." And just as he said land rights, I jumped them steps and I hit him straight at the jaw. Doosh! Hit him straight up the jaw like that, you know. And then I remember we caught up at a fundraising dinner a couple of years ago after I listened to Brad's talk about what he does with Epic Private Journeys, and I said to Brad then, I said, "Brad, I want to tell you a story about us, you know, years ago." And he said to me, "Oh Stan, I don't think that's true," but he knew it was. And reconciliation, and I bring that back to that you know, that was something that happened when I was 14 years of age, and we're now 52 and 53. But he's my brother, he's my friend, and Brad and when we first started Yalari, he come up to me and he said, "Stan, what can we do to help you fundraise?" And Brad has provided for every fundraising dinner in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide and Perth for us. He has provided 4 high-end fundraising travel gifts just as a friend. And for me personally, you know, as one person that had nothing to do with Indigenous people, he has been a friend to me and to Lou and I, and from that type of stuff is when you get to know people, and that was true for me as a person, that we have now become dear friends, and that was only from that one little incident, and we laugh about it today. And those little things, and you know, and it comes up time and time again. And as I said to Greg, you know, we're celebrating our 35 years, and since we left in 1984. So my reconciliation with all my brothers and that went to Toowoomba Grammar School with me, it is about, you know, accepting people for who they are, not the colour of their skin. And for me personally, from a reconciliation point of view, I was just Stan, and that's all I was. And the same opportunity that we're given to these Indigenous children now is that I want our children, I want them to walk into any place, any fundraising dinner, any workshop, that they will be comfortable in who they are. They will never forget where home is. Like I left home in 1985, so I've been away from Mergen since 1985, so 34 years ago. But Mergen is still home, and Sherbing is still home, just like Auntie Denise. Home is still home. Even though my mum and dad, and I've got a younger brother and a younger sister still there, Mergen is still home. So thank you so very much. I wish you all the very best in your process regarding reconciliation. In the truest form is for us now is about bringing healing to this nation, bringing healing to our people. And for us as Indigenous people, we also need to reconcile with our differences for us to move forward as a nation. And we have to build this nation. We have to raise up people in this country, and our generations like Jonte here, you know, our next generation are the people that are going to make a huge difference. And I was thinking about this last night. I'm going to pass it over to Lou, who's going to share more about Yalari. But I honestly believe that that for us as an organisation and for us as a nation, why we focus on generational change is because if 231 years since 1788, since Australia was settled, if we as a nation, if we can have so much technology going on, if we can have so much expertise in that area, but the pure, unsanctified responsibility of a person talking face to face, asking someone about their life, asking someone about where we as Australians are still sitting down, where some people have never sat across the table of another nation, whether they're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, or whether they're from a Sudanese community, or whether they're Cambodian, whether they're New Zealanders. In this digital age we have right now, we are so far backwards that we can't even sit down and do that. And we are coming to the same trough, the same table about reconciliation, the same human basic right of how do we treat people. But yet we are putting people on, putting people into outer space for a journey that's going to cost thousands and thousands of dollars, but yet we can't have reconciliation of true people sitting down, two people sitting side by side and having a conversation about human dignity. We have a disparity on this end and a disparity on this end. And that's where I see it right now, that we have to wedge and make sure that we put a stop to that disparity. And I know when I was at workshops over the years when they did some stuff with the Uluru Statement about a message from the heart of Australia. And I've had the privilege and honour of being out at Uluru. I think I've been out there now 24, 25 times in my life. And I went there in 1983 as a grade 11 student on a trip with Toowoomba Grammar School with 32 other boys. So, it's about rejuvenating, and I think we need to rejuvenate our country, inspire our country, but I wish us all the very best. And for us as a nation, we need to grow up, but I just want to leave that one thought, that, and I hope it's your dream too, that, one day we will see an Aboriginal man or Aboriginal woman, or a Torres Strait Islander man or a Torres Strait Islander woman, sitting at the highest levels of leadership in this country. And as true as I'm standing here today, I know before I pass away, I will see that. And who knows, you might be that man. Just having aspirations to say that you can do it. So I wish you all the very best, and I know Lou's got some notes here, and she can fill in the gaps for me. So thank you so very much to Rosalie. Thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you.
Well, good. Actually, you probably don't want this. As you can see, I'm really quite sick today. That's a light, isn't it? So Waverley's at an advantage today as a husband because I couldn't butt in sounding like this. Normally I would butt in and talk with him. So, of course, I've taken notes so I can butt in now on things that he said. Really, Waverley's my husband. I'm his wife. He's Indigenous. I'm not. He's black. I'm white. We are reconciliation in action every day. And I don't think I don't think he married me because I'm white and I married him because he's black. He was Waverley, I was Lou, man and a woman. Our challenges are all sorts of challenges that men and women have. Also, we're from Australia, and we do our best every day to laugh and get on with life and be respectful, mostly in an unspoken way. So, and I think for me, reconciliation, I take the positive slant and I really want to see it every day. If you have your eyes open to it, you do see it. I'm also delightfully naive, being white, and I can see things that, and I say that with the utmost respect because I'm not Indigenous. So I don't. There was this moment a couple of years into our marriage, and Waverley was training for yet another triathlon or some physical endure. 2 o'clock in the morning he gets up, gets into all his fancy asset clothes and shoes, and he goes for a run on the Gold Coast. And a police car follows him and picks him up and asks him what's he's doing. I mean, he's in hundreds of dollars worth of asset clothes, clearly training for something. So, he gets asked, and Waverley's polite and talks to the policeman. He came back home and I was just, dear God, that still happens. It's amazing that the policeman didn't look at the other level of it. I thought, okay, that's what happens. Acknowledge it and move on. But I do like to see the other moments when reconciliation is working. Waverley skipped over the fact that he was, those 4 families who left Cherbourg to bring their families up in Mergen, predominantly white Mergen, he was the school captain of Mergen State School. A little black boy, the little girl who was the school captain was Chrissy Renoff. What's his name, footballer? Steve. I always remember Chrissy, not Steve. The school captains of a predominantly white school. That in itself, back in 1979, was reconciliation. Those teachers and those students recognised this little boy, this little girl has leadership. Let's put them there. Oh, that's right, they're Indigenous as well, but these are our leaders. So back then, you got to recognise and acknowledge those people. Sure, Rosemary Bishop too, who managed to get him the scholarship. And I think there was another story Waverley probably should have told, but I'll tell it now. So he was the only Indigenous boy back in Toowoomba. He used to go down to the pinball parlour. Now, I don't know what it's like at school now, but when you go out of school, you have to wear your school uniform. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So this is what they do in the private schools, you know. So he walks down the street, and in his backpack, he has his civvies. He goes into the pinball parlour, which is where all the Aboriginal kids played. Quickly on the toilet, change out of his striped blazer and into his civvies and play in the pinball parlour just to be with Aboriginal kids. It's what Aboriginal people need, especially our children. Off he went to school. Was it the deputy? Yeah, do you want to finish your story?
No, you go.
So, what's his name? Deputy?
Yeah. So
So
in the pinball parlour, we weren't allowed. So there was one, and it was right in Margaret Street, and I was coming in. I thought I was really smart having the civvy bag on, and I had my clothes, just normal clothes. And then Mr Bourne was the deputy headmaster, and he seen me coming out, and he walked along the street, and he said, "Stanley, I want to see you in my office on Monday morning." I said, "Yes, sir." And so I went in and seen Mr Bourne. So that was Friday afternoon. We had to be back at the school by 5:10. And so Mr Bourne, so I went into the office and I said to him, I said, "You were at the pinball parlour, which is no longer there." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he was talking about the suspension for me. And I just said to him then, I said, "Sir," I said, "it's the only time I get to see any Aboriginal people, sir, because my family are 2.5 hours away. My mum and dad, I've got 6 other children to look after. I don't see any other black people around me, sir." And then I think the penny dropped, and there was an agreement that, and I only told this to my other friends a couple of years ago, and they said they didn't know that there was an agreement between Mr Bourne and I that I could take a little backpack underneath my blazer that would allow me to go into the pinball parlour just for me to have other Aboriginal children around me.
The expectations we want for our children are there, because they'll meet them. You lower the expectations and they'll meet them too, and that's it. But we do need flexibility, compassion and understanding for those little moments, and the discretion to work out what matters. You know, pick your battles. And I see that every day with the teachers at our schools, our students themselves. So every year in our 26 schools, we get them to hold 2 places going into Year 7, Australia-wide, for our 2 scholarship recipients. Roughly, we take anywhere between 45 and 50 students a year. We gather them together in January, middle of January, so they get to know each other. They're going to school with somebody they know. Another dark face, somebody who gets them. We also bring back the students from the year before, so they're now in Year 8, come back and guide those students through what they think they know. I mean, they're 1 year older. And we also have a bunch of Year 11s or 12s, probably about a dozen of them, and come back for a couple of reasons. One is their leadership is now being stepped up and asked, "Come on, it's your turn to look after these little ones." And the other thing is the little ones go to school knowing a big kid. That's really cool when you're a little kid and you can say hi to the Year 12 person. I think I've just lost track. You know, you can butt in at any point and ask us questions. We're okay with that. We have about 30 to 35 staff now. Half of them are in the office on the Gold Coast. It's just on the Gold Coast because that's where we live. Really, we're a national company. The other half of our staff live in the cities where the children go to school, and they are our support officers. So they're on the ground. They don't work for the school, they're not in the school, but they support them. I think in state education they call different...
Community education.
Yeah. And without these roles, our program wouldn't work. They really do need that extra support. And it's a liaison between the school, the parents. The parents are sometimes 2.5 hours drive away, sometimes they're 4,000 kilometres away, and the student themselves, and sort of helping for that all to work. Not get in the way, but helping facilitate that relationship. So again, some of our support officers are our alumni who've graduated, and some of them are non-Indigenous people, some are teachers who've decided they want to step slightly out of the teaching arena. Social workers, we have a bunch of them too. And they all work together as a team because you can communicate so well over long distances now. And the other ones that support each other are the students themselves. From the oldest ones to the youngest one. That's the natural progression we have. So ideally in our school at any one point, we've got 12 students, 2 in year 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Looking at some years we have 3 or 4 if we get a lot of applications. We ask for a couple more places if they can fit it. You know, it differs every year. Sometimes we've been asked more early in the piece, why don't you just create your own school for Indigenous and people to go to? That's not reconciliation, and it's not the real world, and it's not what our children and our families want. They want to be part of it, and so that's why we do it. We pick the schools. They are high achieving. Yes, that's a good thing, but that's not the only tick for us. They are compassionate from the head down, and more than that, they are also in their hearts understand reconciliation. Even if they don't talk it, they do it. They are talking it. More and more schools have a reconciliation action plan now. There's quite a few. So in Brisbane we have St Margaret's. This year we started with Clayfield. We've got Churchie. Down on the Gold Coast we've got St Hilda's and TSS. And up in Toowoomba we've still got the Glennie and Toowoomba. And John Paul College. John Paul College is one of my favourite schools for our students. It just works, the whole environment. The boarding house is 5 years old. It's not even a boarding house, it's cabins. And it's co-ed. It works really well for our students. Last year, one of our girls was the boarding captain of John Paul College. First year they had that role. The year before, we had one of our boys was the school captain of St Augustine's up in Cairns, and right to the other end of the country, Albany in the southern area of Western Australia, one of our girls was the head girl down there. One of our girls was also in 2013 the vice captain of Canberra Girls Grammar. On and on it goes. They're already stepping up. They're not the captains and vice captains and captains of the what was the Wallabies team that Mitch was? Yeah, Schoolboys Wallabies team. Because they're Indigenous, it's because they're good. That's it. And we can recognise that. And it's not because we've made exceptions, it's because we've raised out the standards. You can meet this, away you go, and now we can acknowledge you. Is there any questions at the moment? Yeah.
I've been trying to figure out how you work. I was thinking, you said, we've got 26 schools. I thought, they've got 26 schools. Oh, you're working.
We partner with, sorry, okay.
I know that aren't yours.
We partner with 26 schools around Australia. What we do is offer scholarships for Indigenous children. So the child, the parent, guardian, grandma, auntie, apply to us. Our applications closed April 30 this year. We have 107 applications Australia-wide, a lot from the Torres Straits. And So there's a recommendation from their school principal. Last couple of years NAPLAN results. The children fill out probably a 7-page application form, so do the parents, and it all comes into us. Then we have a selection committee who has a look at those applications very thoroughly. Some work for us, some are independent. And we probably cull that down to, typically we probably interview 70 a year. We go to them. We go to every community, sit on the front porch, sit in the lounge room, sit in the park, it doesn't matter, but we go to them. At least 2 of us. More of our alumni are helping us out now with those interviews because they know it. They lived it. They can tell you really quickly that kid's going to make it and you should send that child to that school. That interview process throughout Australia takes probably 4 months. It's quite extensive and thorough. And then the next stage is once they get through our selection, we think you'd be great. And then I've got a big whiteboard in my office, I've got lines drawn. This child would go well with this child to go to Riverview in Sydney. This child would be really good to go to Geelong Grammar. Geography plays a part. Aunties and uncles who live in the same city play a part. Academics plays a part. They don't have to be an A student. They have to be having A for effort. That's all we want. Try your hardest in anything. A lot of our applicants are the captain or the vice captain of the school. A lot of them are the eldest in the family too. So then we have a good look at what school we think they would be best suited for, and so many things come into play. Yeah.
Do you include sporting ability?
Definitely.
In the assessment?
Definitely. But let me make a big generalisation. I haven't met too many Indigenous kids who aren't good at sport. That's their leveller. But definitely anything, whether they're good at, look, they might lead the NAIDOC week. They might be the captain of the sports team, whatever that is. It's all those things. What we're looking for is resilience and stickability. How they look after others. There's a question in our application, when is a time you've got through a fear? Now for a little child to answer that, they really have to think about things. And then there's another one, tell us about your greatest achievements. The parents also say that too. Everything's taken into consideration. Have a good look at all sorts of things. We really want to give every child a go, if they can. Sorry.
Do the scholarships start from year 7 or
Yep.
higher?
No, year 7. In the first...
Big thing, isn't it, for little year 7s to be away from their family?
It is big.
Boarding situation.
But we've had students start in year 9. No success.
No. The clicks are already set.
Exactly. And they've got their clicks back home. Very hard to remove that.
Yeah.
So year 7 is what works for us. Everybody's new at the school. It's a time for growth on so many levels, and it's what works for us. Our retention rate annually is 93%. However, if a student gets to year 10 with us, we still support them. Going back into their community, to another school, even if they go to TAFE, whatever, we have a very big pathways program that looks after all of them. They're all our alumni, like a school. You don't actually have to finish year 12 to be an alumni of a school. Same with us. And they support each other. It's not that we've told them to do that, they just do it. Every year we have a camp for them. Hang on, let me go back to the selection process. Then they go and have an interview with the school. We don't send 5 children to have an interview at Churchie for 2 places. We send them 2 students. They're pretty much it, and the principals know this is it. I think out of over 350 suggestions of these children could be really good for your school, 2 have been knocked back. That was all. So that's the next stage. But they have to have a genuine interview with the head of school, and make it just like anybody else. Then
So just so we can get a view of the enormity of what you've done for children. So how many are in the alumni now after 14, 15 years? 349 actually, so that means we've had 500 children on our program. Yeah, so 350, yeah. It's big. From the first year we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We really did sit at the kitchen bench
Waverley said, oh, let's do this. Let's create scholarships for other Indigenous children. I said, yeah, let's do that. And then I thought, how do we do that?
I remember the first year, 2005, when I went to Cherbourg, and we spoke to about, there was about 8 or 9 families, and Mum and Dad were telling me, and I invited them to come out and talk about their experience as parents. And then I remember Mum and Dad saying, my mum was cried for 2 weeks, and she's saying, come on now John, bring that boy home now, bring that boy home now. And I remember my Nan Viola Hill, and Nan would growl at my father and say, John, don't you take that boy out, you leave him there, and Gracie, you knock it off, you stop being silly. So if it wasn't for strong people like my grandmother who helped raise my dad and then played a big part in my life, and she came to my every speech day in grade 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12. That was because she supported the idea of what we were doing. Yeah. And if it wasn't for families like that, and I think that's the other thing, is that the families have to be committed. So for me personally, and for us as our organisation, we invest $150,000 into their education. And from an investment point of view, we want them to, if we're investing in them, we want them, and I've said this to our Year 12 graduates, the way that you could repay the debt to Yalari is to pay it forward, that your sons and your children will go to the same private school. So I have 4 children to my first marriage. My son Waverley went to Toowoomba Grammar School. He went there from grade 7 to grade 12. So, and I've got 2 little grandsons now. And I remember when Waverley finished in 2013, and I said to my daughter Jeanette, Yasmin, Savannah and Waverley, at speech day in 2013, I said to Waverley and I said to my 3 daughters, I expect my grandsons to come to this school. And they are already enrolled. So if we want to change a generation, you do it. And so when we set Yalari up, it was just like the Nike ad, you just do it. And we could have gone and did a degree in business on how to go about setting up a business, but we just did it. When we first started talking about fundraising, and I'd go to Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne or Adelaide, and I'd sit across the table from very, very wealthy families and foundations, and I'd come back to Lou and I'd say, they didn't quite get it, we're not going to get any support. But then I just knew, I just said, it's just next. If they didn't get it then, they would get it in the future. So for us, for the generosity of so many individuals around Australia, it is about us with that generosity of them providing this scholarship. But at the end of the day, and I've said to our children now, is that the paying it forward, and we have a program called in Year 12, which is our Pay It Forward program, where we ask our children to fundraise $20,000. And so it's $20,000 for someone to sponsor a child for a year. So when I said $150,000, you get $120,000 worth of sponsorship, and then $30,000 is all the extra, the camps and mentoring and support that our children get. So last year was a young lady from Cairns, Jada. And so in 2018, 17, 16, 15, 14. In 2014 we was at a camp, a Year 10 camp down at Trinity College at Melbourne University. And I said to our children then, I said, I'm very embarrassed as an Aboriginal man that there is no Indigenous person sponsoring any of our children. I'm very embarrassed by that. So what I said to them, I set you a challenge. I said, there's 38 of you in Year 10. I challenge you to raise $20,000 to sponsor a student. Then the next year, our Year 10 will do it. So Jada, who was from Cairns, finished at St Hilda's last year. She was sponsored for 5 years of schooling by our Yalari children in Year 10. That is a generation of change. So the return on investment for us in the future will be that our children will be sponsoring other children to go to private schools around Australia, and they are changing the next generation of education. And it will be and it will be where it's not a novelty that you've got Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children going to private schools around Australia. It's not a novelty anymore.
So where does the money come from?
From donations, from supporters. Our biggest support at the moment has been the Vincent Fairfax Family Foundation. They sponsor 23 children for us from grade 7 to grade 12. It doesn't matter whether it's a public school, private school or a state school. We as Australians expect to get good education. And it's a right that we should have. And I think for us personally, we as an organisation were criticised that we were taking the cream of the crop, or some people from that our young people were taken out of the thing. And for me personally, and I said, and the comeback for me was, if you don't want to be criticised, do nothing, say nothing, and be nothing. And at least you're in the arena. At least you're having a go. And for me, it's about, and the other comeback was, it's choices for our families now. For us as Indigenous people, we never had a choice to go to a private school. Now we have. But with that choice comes sacrifices.
So the question that begs me is, so what's the secret of your success? Because what you do is fundamentally sound, is fundamentally the right thing, but that doesn't give success. So what would you say are the couple of things that has led to the great success you've had?
I can answer that. I think it's the foundation. I think I honestly believe is picking the right child with the right family support, going to the right school. That in a nutshell is the foundation. You're having children that want to be committed for 6 years. And I can tell you right now that, I've sat in many, many interviews, and I'll give you one example. There was this great young lady, she was from New South Wales. I think she was from Burke, and I remember her dad saying, if you don't like it after a week, you can come home. And as soon as he said that, I said, brother, you shot yourself in the foot. If you're committed, I'll be committed. I'll give you 100%, no worries about that. But if you aren't going to be committed, that's where we're at. Because, I can pick a child within 2 minutes. Easy.
A family.
And a family within 2 minutes.
I think that differentiates us from other organisations. Our rigour in our selection process. You have to have the courage to say no sometimes.
Yeah.
Because it's worse if they go away for term and end up back home. We don't want that. So sometimes we have to say no. And I think our rigorous selection process and the support from our support officers in the schools, I think that's what we owe our success to. There's other things like the governance of our board, our staff in head office, our fundraising, etc., etc. But why our children are more than okay. They're excelling, they're supporting each other, they're each other's greatest friends. Doesn't matter whether they went to the same school. They've created another community.
Or a family.
They've got their family in Derby, they've got their family from Geelong Grammar, but the family that really gets them, and every experience they've ever had, is the Yalari peers. They don't even have to be in the same year group, and they're there supporting each other. I watch it on Facebook, I see them supporting each other. I tell them I'm watching them too.
So when you said that they first get there, that's the hardest time.
No, yes and no. Some children it is. I've had year 10, year 11 and year 12 children ring me heartbroken. Finally homesickness hits them. Could be any reason why it hits them then. But yeah.
So do you give intensive support as needed, or when they first come in?
Definitely. When they first come in was probably while they get through it. And we think the little year 10's okay. But that's their moment to crash. So boom, the support goes over there very quickly. Because even if we don't recognise that, they're struggling, another student will tell us, hey, you need to go and look at that one.
Do you have any kind of a social aunts and uncles kind of program so that when the kids, if the kids want to go out for a weekend or something like that, do the schools or your organisation organise that kind of thing?
Both is the answer, because it depends on the school and their programs. But definitely, and a lot of their day friends and their parents end up playing that role. They'll go out with their day friends and their parents still support them long after school's finished. We do very informally arrange that type of thing too. If we know a child who comes from a long way away is the only one that's left in the boarding house or the only couple, we'll arrange that as well for them to be supported, because they need to go out. However, if they go out every weekend, then they don't really bond with the rest of the boarders. So there's a balance of being part of the sport and everything else that goes with being a boarder in one of these schools. So you can meet 30 years later, know that you punched him and you're still great mates, and the prizes that Brad gives us are worth thousands of dollars. A trip to Botswana, Tanzania, some 5-star place in, Hamilton Island, Qualia. It's quite remarkable. I went to a state school. My father was a principal in the state school system, and I grew up in Sydney. I didn't need to go to boarding school. And he believed in the state system. So I had to be there. I recognise the difference with the bonds that Waverley made than I made.
But you know, the secret is it's a partnership for us with families, first and foremost. From an education point of view, we recognise that our families and their children, extended family, are their first educators. And then we, in partnership with the families and communities, is about us working together for the same common goal of empowering and educating our children. And I think that's the biggest thing for us also, is that this is just an idea that we've come up with. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way, and I think along the way is that the lessons that we've made as organisations, it is about one is about is about being able to have the tough conversations with families, with children. I think it's about having a high level of expectation. And prior to me working with Yalari and doing that, I worked for Education Queensland, and it was quite interesting. I was a community education counsellor and a district CEC, and my role as a private school educated young person and then working in schools. And I didn't want to be working with the children because I think at the time then, the emphasis was the high suspension and exclusion rate of our Indigenous children at state schools around Australia, or Queensland especially. And I wanted to work with children that were giving education a go. And I think that's where it's at, is that, you know, we as adults, and you can look back and say, you know, education is the key. And I look at my mum and dad's generation, you know, they were educated grade 5 and grade 8 education. My brothers and sisters, we all went through year 12. Mary, my sister, who's now deputy principal at Atherton State High School in North Queensland, she went off to tertiary education. She was the first one in our family to be tertiary educated. And then now out of that, and I remind our children, and I keep this, and I'll leave it on this note, that the only difference between this generation and that of their grandparents is just educational opportunities. And that is what we are doing. So this generation, Jonte, in your generation right now, so, you know, we as an organisation is instigating generational change. So the generation for us as an organisation now is, we've done 15 years, we've got 10 to go, which will have an impact on 25 years, which will have a huge impact on 25 years, which is 5 generations. That is the business we are in. We are in the generation change business. And we are also in the nation building change that is going to make a difference in this country. And as I said to you before, we are going to see an Indigenous person at the highest level within this country. And it's only going to be happening through education. And like-minded Australians getting together for the same common goal of empowering our nation. So the reconciliation, it still continues, but I believe now is that reconciliation now turns into healing. And the healing of our nation starts with us as Indigenous people, because you can either, it's a bit like rocket ships. Rocket ships don't have rear vision mirrors. It's only forward. And for us as a nation, we're only going forward. And if individuals like yourselves, with an organisation through reconciliation, not only in Queensland but throughout Australia, reconciliation at the grassroots level needs to reach the top echelon of leadership to bring about true reconciliation in this country, where Indigenous people are recognised for who they are and for what they can do, but what they can do to bring about peace and healing in this nation. That's the business we're going to be in. So thank you so very much to Rosalie. Thank you so very much for your invitation for Lou and I. It's wonderful to catch up after all of these years. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much.